Hello and welcome to Gaming the Podcast. My name is John Robertson and I'll be joined shortly by Stace Harmon. And this week we're talking Neon White, a speedrunning platformer come first-person shooter from Annapurna Interactive and Angel Matrix. We'll be talking what makes the game tick, where its qualities lie, and how both Stace and I have responded to it thus far. Now be warned that there are some very minor spoilers for some of the narrative, but there's nothing that's going to give away any key plot points or incidents. Here's a clip to get us started.
We're called neons, sinners plucked from hell to do God's dirty work. But I'm finding it hard to believe we're in heaven.
Okay, so we've both been playing Neon White, and something that I've noticed in reviews and in people just talking about the game, discussing the game now that it's out, people have played it, is they describe themselves as being addicted to the game. That one more turn, one more try, one more level, one more attempt, whatever. Is that something you've experienced? Is that one of the terms one of the sensations you would describe your?
I was up until 2 a.m. this morning playing it, so yes, absolutely.
Did you start at 1:30?
I actually did start quite late because the reason for that was because the other thing I was playing was Grindstone, also on Switch. I'm addicted to that as well. Yeah, it's a term that I'm not particularly keen on. I tend to only try to use that term when it's literal, when you can be addicted to addictive or addicting substances. But I understand it, and it's shorthand for a whole bunch of feelings and a process that you go through. And so in the sort of colloquial way of using that word, yes, I would say that I am addicted to it. Not just in the one more turn thing, one more level thing, but in the almost on the sort of a micro level of doing a level for the first time and then almost immediately doing it again. It's off, unless I get like a gold, it goes bronze, silver, gold, and then ace, which is like a platinum kind of trophy. Unless I get a gold on the first attempt, which sometimes happens, I am immediately doing that level again. And so there is this, and I'm also doing it. I don't think I've stopped like halfway through a mission. So it's, however many individual levels might make up that mission. Typically, I think 10, but there are some that are shorter that I've seen. I'm also doing all of that complete mission. I'm not like stopping in the middle. So there's like, on different levels, I am kind of going on these little mini loops. And then once I get back to like the Heaven HQ, I'm then kind of tidying up everything that's there and maybe going back and finding some gifts for some people. So yes, I can definitely see why that word is being bandied around quite a lot. I do find it quite addictive. And it's not, it's quite unusual. I think Elden Ring was probably the last game in a very different way that I would kind of lose track of time or just be like, I know that I should stop now, but I just want to do this one last thing, which then turns into several other things. And it's quite nice. It can be nice. It can also be detrimental to your health, but it can be nice to kind of be that immersed in a game. It doesn't happen that often, so it's like when I'm doing it, that's all I'm really thinking about. So that's definitely been my experience so far. I'm about, I don't know, 2/3 of the way through, 2/3 of the way through the game. You're a bit further on, aren't you? How does that feed into your experience, particularly as I imagine, or I presume, the levels get harder or more complex or more or longer even?
The levels, there's more going on in levels as you progress through the game. I hesitate to say that they're necessarily more complex. Like you are doing more things in them in order to reach the end. But it's kind of like you're stacking elements on top of each other that you already know. So it's not like, yes, there are sometimes you're working out how to do a certain bit within the limitations that they give you. So, you get a card. How many bullets can I shoot before it's wasted? Because I need to be really precise because I need to use that card's platforming ability on the next bit because I won't get another card before that. So it becomes, you need to be more precise as you go on for that reason. But I don't know if I would say more complex, only in that, well, no, it is more complex. You are doing more things. You've got to do more things in a smaller amount of time. But I don't think it's more complex in terms of like working out what you've got to do. I think you always know what you've got to do, and then it's just about executing on that. So the complexity comes from that side rather than a complexity as in like I need to figure out something.
Yeah, so it's not complicated. It's not what you're having to do isn't complicated, but it's complex in that there are more moving parts. It's kind of, I guess, maybe like depth versus complexity. Like it's not. Yeah, and
like it is. I mean, that sounds like it's doing the game a disservice, and I agree that it probably is doing a game a disservice to describe it like that, because it's not that it lacks complexity, and sometimes you are figuring out what to do, but it's not, it's figuring out, well, it's like I said, like how do I've got four shots with this before I need to use it to boost jump or whatever, and then I've got X number of shots with this, X number of shots with this, I need to move in this certain pattern after killing this demon in order to get this thing. So you are working it out on that level, and that obviously becomes more or less pressing depending on whether you're like what your goal is. Like, is your goal just to get through the level? Is it just to get gold? Is it to get ace? That becomes you at first. So at first I was playing the game and I wouldn't move past a mission until I got all ace and all gifts on all levels.
Right.
So I just keep going back to them and do them again and again and again and again. Like, that got harder, obviously, as you move through the game. So I've stopped doing that because progress was so slow. So then I went for a period of just racing through the whole game and doing as little as possible and just taking whatever my first score was, unless I was like 0.1 seconds away from the next best. And it's like, okay, I'll go in and do another run and tick that off and then move on. But you can't play like that either throughout the whole game, because at a certain point your rank isn't high enough to move on to the next mission set. So you need to go back and do it. Although that didn't happen for me until quite a long time into the game. But I think that's because I spent so long in the early ones
inside it.
I had built up loads of ranks before.
Yeah, because your ranking goes up when you get a gold or an ace medal. If you get a silver or a bronze, then it doesn't go up, but you can still progress, which is one of the many clever things. There's a couple of things along that progression system that I think work really, really well, and that is one of them. That you just need to complete the level and you'll get a bronze medal and you can move on. If you need to get a gold or an ace in order to increase your rank, and which I think is great, so you don't get stuck. There's sometimes when you're trying to work out what you're trying to do and how to actually, it's not often, but sometimes you have to work out, you need to juggle the cards rather than just use them as they're given to you. In the early levels, it's very much it's almost, this is going to sound disparaging and it isn't meant to at all, but it's, in the early levels, I came to view it somewhat as like a QTE, a procession of QTEs, because you're given the tools that you need and you're given a very clear path. The level design is completely kind of on point in that you're not casting around looking at where to go, which they then utilize later on to a great extent, because when you're looking for the gifts, like that's when you have to stop and look around a level and actually like appreciate all the different paths. And also when you're like trying to get the very fastest time that you start cutting corners and all the rest of it. But the point to point level design in terms of how you move through that, the progress you move how you move through that level is very tightly designed, I think. So yeah, you can progress whenever you want. You just need to complete the level, which isn't typically a difficult thing to do. It is that thing again. The challenge comes from doing it quickly rather than doing it at all, which I think is, again, sensible. So you're not kind of just getting stuck and frustrated and throwing it down. And then the final sort of little thing that completes that for me is that, and it's a small thing, but it's important to me, is that you don't see what you need. You don't see the time that you need for any of the medals when you first try a level. And I think that's a really clever, really smart design choice, because you go into that level not with a kind of existing notion of a pace that you need to be setting. you just go into it and you play it. You play what's in front of you. You know, like it's what's there is all that matters. And you know it's against the clock, obviously. But it's not until you've done that, you've set that first time, that you then get to see what times you need to get in order to get the other medals, which I think that's when it kind of, that for me, it refocuses my attention. It's like, okay, so I got silver or whatever, and then it's like, well, okay, so what do I want to move on here, or do I, like, how far off, like you say, like how far off am I from gold or ace? And I've also taken to like playing a little game where I will guess what, if I get a silver medal, I will guess what I think the gold time before the leaderboard, before it comes up to show you, I'll guess what I think gold is going to be, based on how it felt and how like much time I think I could shave off it relatively easily. And that's been I've been pretty accurate on that. So it feels just everything feels very tightly designed. And everything works, which sounds like not a big deal, but in this kind of game that is very much about speed and precision, that is a big deal. If it was frustrating, if certain things just were a bit janky, then it would be really irritating.
Yeah, well, I think that's part of the reason why the game is so compulsive. Like the fact that it's easy to know how far you're off from a certain time. I think it's easy to know that because it's obvious in levels where you're losing time. Like it's absolutely clear and obvious every single time you lose time. Like the first time you're in a level, you know that you're losing time on that bit. Because the design is so clear, the enemy placement is so clear, what you can do with each weapon is so obvious, and like what platforming thing you can get away with each level, with each tool, with each gun, with each boost, whatever you want to call those cards, with each card. It's so obvious where you're making mistakes, and I think it's addictive, but in a way that is encouraging and aspirational rather than addictive in a way that it's like, oh, it's annoying, it's lacking this tiny, it's that, what do you call that, the bliss point, like Doritos, like lots of soft drinks and food snacks. You have this concept called the bliss point, where if you have a 10 out of 10 flavor, then they only want a 9 out of 10 because 10 out of 10 is satisfying and 9 out of 10 isn't. So they make their snacks purposefully just below the bliss point, so you eat more.
You're constantly striving for it. There's a reason you can't stop once you've popped, and that's the reason. Yeah,
exactly. So a lot of games kind of do sometimes feel like that, and a lot of like sort of the worst engagement mechanics are exactly that. But this game doesn't do that. When you're just away from that bliss point, but you know exactly how to achieve the bliss point within one or two rounds, like normally one, of doing each level. And I think this is what I mean by like the game is both more complex when you move through the levels, and also just equally as complex, because the game is constantly teaching you and constantly pushing new stuff on you. And those early levels, you are kind of guided. And then a lot of the early levels for each mission, you're in the 10 level missions, you are guided. But the real tests are at the end of those levels. And I think, you don't feel overwhelmed or lacking the ability to, like, as complexity ranks up, your understanding as to how to immediately overcome that complexity also ramps up at like an even level. So you're constantly just at, it feels like, so even in the most complex things, when you fail at them, you know exactly why you failed. You know exactly how to solve that problem.
I think the game feels collaborative in that sense to me, rather than deliberately testing, rather than finding the sweet spot of steady skill progression and then pushing it just beyond that from a design point of view, pushing it just beyond that in order to make it hard or to give it longevity, or to, we can't have you achieve this thing the first time. You have to feel like you've practiced it in order to feel like you've earned progress, which I think can be artificially inflated or included sometimes in game, or quite often in games. This feels more collaborative. It feels like the game saying, I mean, you know why you didn't get a gold medal there, don't you? And it's, I do. I can see exactly where I'd lost time there. I can see exactly And I think it's also there's a trust element for me in the game, in the design, because I can look at that, I can get a gold medal, I can see that an ace medal is like another 4 seconds off the gold medal time that I may have only just squeaked in under. But I trust that it's like, yeah, I mean, I could do that. I trust that I can do it without hours of repetition and like, it's only the best of the best that are going to be able to ever achieve that. And I trust it because the mechanics are so tight, the control system, which it's worth mentioning, I'm playing on Switch and I'm playing with the gyroscope controls, which I have never actively chosen to do on any Switch game. I've like played around with it, Mario Odyssey and that kind of thing, the first party games particularly, played around with it to see how it works, but it's never been my preferred way of playing. But in Neon White, it is absolutely, and I mean that you can, if we were being kind of disparaging about the Switch controllers, we could say, well, the analog sticks aren't exactly the best, but nonetheless, even I think regardless of that, it also there's a tactile element to playing with the gyroscope because it's very much like when you play VR. It's like it's a 1-to-1 motion thing. You're moving around, you're firing a gun. I'm not doing cartwheels and somersaults around my living room, but some of it is 1-to-1 motion. So, and even so, I still trust that the controls work. I sometimes get slightly on the most complex levels or the longest levels, I get slightly out of like position and my hand is in an odd way. And every now and then I'll pause it and just reset, but that's very rare. So yeah, I basically trust that everything works and that I can apply myself to it and understand how to get better at it.
Yeah.
And and as a final thing on that, like the achieving the ace thing, what I think is also a nice touch is that you don't get to see the global leaderboards until you've achieved an ace rank, which is a minor thing, but it's like, it's that constant, for me anyway, the constant thing of like, you play a game, you think you're quite good at it, you have a look at the online leaderboards and you're like, oh, right, okay. Hades, I remember that happened with Hades a lot for me. But okay, I'm actually nowhere near like the, even the middling kind of times on this. But this isn't kind of going out of its way to rub your nose in that. It's only once you've achieved that highest of the high accolades on any given level that you even get to see the global leaderboards for that specific environment that you've just run through. So, saving my feelings, I suppose, is what I'm saying. Which I think is cute. It's like, that's quite a nice, like, little thing that you don't, and there's obviously the time trial ghost element that you get to see, but you need to earn that as well. So it just kind of ranks you up in stages and you exposes stuff to you or you to stuff when you are ready to see it. Which again, I think just feels collaborative rather than like combative.
I mean, the way I look at that bit, I suppose it depends what kind of personality you are, I guess, because I suppose it can be that, how did you describe it? Like saving your feelings. Yeah, saving your feelings. So, and that certainly is part of it. I'd never actually considered it like that. I'd considered it more in terms of like, like it's an achievement to open up the leaderboard, like it's some extra thing to think of. It's like, well done, you've qualified from the national championship and now you're at the Olympics, and here are the Olympians. How good are you against these?
It's like that stuff is of no interest to you, or of not interest, but of no use to you, really, until you are already performing at the top level. There's no point, opening yourself up to playing against Roger Federer if you're playing at, club level tennis. So
to go back to the ace rank thing as well, and this kind of actually contradicts some of what I said before, in that some of the ace times in some of the levels you can't actually do by just going through the motions in the same way as you have in order to get a gold
no,
or any other medal.
You have to take a different path.
So you have to find a different path, and that's where it comes in when you said, if I'm 4 seconds behind, I got a gold, I'm now 4 seconds behind the ace time, that's crazy. How's that happened? So in that, you can't just go through motions. You do need to go back in and figure out a new route. And sometimes in levels you can see, even on the first time you're playing it, it's like, oh yeah, I can see that. I can see like 2 seconds save there, whatever, but I'm not going to do it. going to get through the level, see
first.
what see what I've got in front of me, and then we'll go from there.
It's like having a baseline understanding before you start tweaking. It's like, okay, yeah, I get that I could take that shortcut, but I then am sort of depriving myself of information. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, and what I think is really clever about that from like a level design perspective and the sensation that it thereafter causes in the player, which is the important thing. Level design in and of itself is meaningless without a reaction. Is that it seems like, or it can seem like on many of those levels, that like there is only one way to do the level, and you have thrown through it and you've nailed it, and you're like within say a tenth of whatever you think the optimum, the best possible theoretical time is. But then you go back in and it subverts all of your understanding of that level, and it triggers in a very real it's no more real than other games that trigger it, but in a very sort of meaningful and powerful way. It really forces you to engage really, really intimately with the level design and understand why these seemingly random platforms have been put in there, or why that bit of the bridge is that half a block longer, or there is that one extra enemy there that needs that one specific shot that you've got remaining on your gun or whatever. And when you go into the ace level, and you see that and you appreciate that when you play, but then when you do the ace levels, it's like, oh wow, like I could only barely achieve what I could achieve going through quote unquote normally, and then you manage to shave off 4 more seconds of your time and kill everything in a different way than you did before. And it's like, wow, like whoever's designed this has done a brilliant job, because they've made it I can only just squeeze through this one way. And I thought, well, that's it. I've done the level now. That's the only way I can interact with it. And then they're like, oh no, but you can also squeeze through this other way as well.
Yeah, and it's funny because absolutely. That's exactly the experience I've had. And the game gives you little hints of that, I think, because there isn't a lot of redundancy built into it. So if you're finishing a level with maybe a couple of cards left, then there's a chance that you don't need to get all of those cards in order to finish the level. It hasn't just given you extra cards because, you might mess it up. It's that, no, it trusts that you're going to do this well. So if you've got extras, it may be that you don't need to go the particular way you've gone in order to get the extra cards. You don't need to open that chest, whatever it is. And in that way, I came to kind of think of certain parts of it in the same way that I think about Portal. Because you play Portal and you think, certainly initially, you start out thinking, well, there is just one way to complete every level. And even when you've played Portal a lot and you think you're being clever, you're often doing things within the realms of the very specific way that something is designed to be solved. And it's a puzzle in a similar way to Neon White is. But then you watch other people play Portal and it's like, this is nuts. Like they're using this like a tool set rather than like a puzzle to be solved. And those are where it's like you get, I get to feel a bit of that with Neon White, because it feels like I'm being clever. It feels like I'm doing things that are, I guess, outside of the test parameters, to put it in kind of Portal terms. But of course I'm not. I'm just doing things exactly as they've been designed to be done. But it gives you that, it has that built-in area of exploration and attainment that it kind of tricks you, or it lets you trick yourself into believing that you're doing something particularly clever, because and that goes back all the way back to that kind of critical path through each level is so well signposted that it can feel like there's no other way to go, but you don't think, oh, this is a completely linear experience. You just follow what feels like the natural feel and the flow of the level. And that's when you understand that, actually, instead of going in that door and out the other side, I can probably or possibly just cut out that building entirely. Obviously, you need to be aware of, like, if there's an enemy in there, then you have to find a way to deal with that and still complete the parameters of the test, or satisfy the parameters of the test. But yeah, it has that, like, there's like a Matrix feel to it. It's like you just, you're going about your business and then peel back the curtain and realize that there's more to it.
Because I think because it does, like, it does feel, it is linear, Like, and once you, even though I understand and I agree with what you mean about it not feeling linear, but like once you've learnt the level, and even once you know, and when you know how to do the ace level, like it's linear in that you're going to be doing that same thing all the time until you've completely nailed it. And oftentimes, like, I'm not really like a big speed running person, really. But when it's done well, like it is, there's no denying that it is utterly compulsive, and I will be obsessed with it. Like on the fourth Survivor on Resident Evil 2 remake, the speed run in that, like I've never had any desire to do a speed run ever in Resident Evil, apart from in any of the Resident Evils, apart from maybe if I think I can fairly comfortably get the best rank that you need and do it under a certain time. In order to get the S rank or whatever at the end of the game, and those times are nowhere near as hardcore as they used to be on the PlayStation, on PS1. But the fourth Survivor in Resident Evil 2 remake, that it's just set up. Here's your route. Yeah, there are some distractions on the route and stuff that you need to learn to avoid. But here's a stream of enemies. The stream of enemies is going to come the same way all the time, and so long as you hit your marks all the time, then you can predict where the enemies are going to be. Like if you miss your mark a little bit, then it's like, oh no, I'm like 1 second or even half a second out. The enemies are going to have already spawned, or they're going to spawn a bit later. So now that grenade I normally throw is going to be messed up. I'm either going to have to wipe and start again, or try to, just get through it back. Yeah. And normally the answer is, if you're sure that you've worked out the perfect route, normally the answer is start again. And that's the same on this as well. Like you can feel like when you're going for those best times, even if you've got the ace and you want to improve, it's like, okay, wipe. Like even at the start, it's like, oh no, didn't press forward on analog stick fast enough. Like wipe, start again. And I normally, it's not that I normally avoid them. It's just normally that I don't really embrace or seek out those sorts of games. Even though I love racing games, I suppose that's speedrunning all the time. Just trying to do that perfect lap all the time. But yeah, I don't. But I think,
well, it's often within. So and absolutely, you do. You play a lot of racing games, and that is an interesting comparison. But I wonder if that's because, like, as it is for me, the speedrunning that I'm not really interested in personally trying. I've watched a few like speedruns, glitched speedruns, where you're falling through level geometry, and you're clipping through things, and then if you tap left twice this way and forward this way and then roll, you'll fall through the level and end up in, later in the game. Those are the things I'm not interested in trying or doing myself, but I've watched, perhaps unsurprisingly, Last of Us speedruns that are all about that. They're all about like changing weapons in this particular time because it glitches through this and all the rest of it. I'm not interested in partaking in that, but I'm interested in watching it. But the things I am interested in partaking in are the more contained, like, what would that be? It's almost not legitimate isn't the right word, but I suppose glitchless is the right word, but the ones where you're using the tools the game gives you rather than exploiting the code is kind of how I view it, I suppose. And that's what Neon White's doing. It's very much these are the rules of the test. You've got the same tools as everybody else. So how does that play into how you can play the game? And I think for me that fits because historically I've never really been one for speed running outside of that. Hades is an obvious example where you are setting the test parameters yourself to an extent with certain packs of punishment parameters. And one of those is a time-based one. You have to complete each level within 5 minutes or 7 minutes. And so those are the ones I'm interested in, where it's like, I'm not interested necessarily in kind of breaking the game in order to achieve a never before seen time, but I am interested in, like, I guess it's a more safe, I don't know how to describe it really, but it's a more controlled environment.
Well,
I
it's
suppose.
deliberate.
Yeah,
it's active rather than just some passive, some glitched run that exists passively, as in not actively designed by the designers. It's a mistake.
But the active part of that, I would say, is the and I think why it builds up such a community is because there's an active search that goes on for the different strategies that can be used in those situations. And that's why you still hear about Mario Galaxy or whatever, like people finding Mario 64 or Ocarina of Time, finding these new things 10 years later, 20 years later. Oh, a new strat has been found for this. Yeah. And I think that's the active part of that. It's the community actively looking for ways, the nooks and crannies in the game that they can get into and behind. Kind of prise it open kind of thing.
Yeah. The active part of it is from the audience, whereas on Neon White, like you were saying before about collaboration, it's both active from the designer and active from the player base. And I think this interesting you brought up the glitched stuff in other games, the glitch speedrunning in other games, because I was thinking, last night I was thinking while playing Neon White, and the fact that guns shoot, obviously it's what a gun does, but they also provide you with some power boost, a stomp, a burst forward, whatever. I was wondering, was inspiration for this game specifically born from glitchy speedrunning records in which in often a lot of the powers or a lot of the glitches that see players arrive at these incredible times are from weapons that have some unintended secondary purpose, i.e. a famous one like Halo's boost jump in using rocket launcher. Like, has this game been born out of exactly that reality where people are finding secondary functions for in-game tools, normally weapons, that help them zoom through levels really quickly? Like Doom Eternal has some really famous sort of modern ones where you use I think it's an exploding barrel or something, and you can like jump up through the top of the world geometry, and then literally just cut out. That's one level you can cut out like a half or a third of the level or something. Just some crazy thing. And you're doing that exact same thing here. Like you're glitch jumping barrels in order to get to a place that would be otherwise impossible. It's just that. So because Ben Esposito, the designer of this game, did say that like after he made Donut County, which is way different. Which is really like mellow and calm and meditative and, just kind of like just an experiential thing largely. There are some puzzle elements to it, but I mean, they're hardly challenging. And then he said that this Neon White is a game for freaks. And I think that also plays into that. Like the people that are finding glitches in speed and in order to allow them to do speedruns really crazy, like in the, using the word as a positive, they're freaks, right? They are like, they're spending their time doing this just really niche thing that brings them amazing joy, and there's a big community around it online. But it's a freakish way to play in that it's just abnormal, different, like that. So I do wonder if he's either a glitch heavy kind of player, or even if he's not, he's just inspired by the idea that players are finding unusual secondary functions for things that are otherwise really familiar, which is exactly what this game is. There's a shotgun, but it also does this other thing. There's a revolver, but it also gives you this other thing. And there's a sort of a rifle-y kind of gun that also does a different thing. Like,
yeah, that's a really interesting parallel and comparison, because it does. Yeah, I would be interested to know that it does it, because it would be. I think it would be disingenuous to say that glitch speedruns exist in and of themselves and exist outside of the realm of video games, and they don't have any purpose. And because that's not true. I think they have lots of either applications or learnings that either other players or designers or would-be designers can take from it, and it's a bit like we're getting a bit out there now, but it feels a bit like the unintended inventions that come from, or the side product inventions that come from something like, well, why would we go to the moon? That, well, the mission has its own primary focus and there's a reason that's happening, but out of that we get things like, Velcro and cycling gear and kids nappies and whatever, because we're inventing all of these technologies that then can be, and it's a bit like army, military tech as well. It's like there's a whole load of stuff that comes out of that.
Well, food technology is one of the biggest ones.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and so whether that's intended or not, whether that's in this instance, just to bring it back down to earth, whether it's intended to, that a glitch speed run will reveal certain things, it nonetheless can, or it does, and then it can give birth to other ideas, possibly one like Neon White. I think that's a really interesting parallel to draw.
Well, and then it brings it round full circle as well. Like it's, here's an accidental glitch, or not, it hasn't been found accidentally, but it's been left in the game accidentally. People are now making all these speedrunning videos, this whole community built around that. The game has basically changed into this other thing for those people and even spectators of it. And now here's someone bringing it back to game again, like core game. Let's, bring it back to a core game. So it's kind of, if society imitates art, and now now it's flipped back in order to form the circle again. So, well, okay, and then I think probably there's just a couple of extra parts of this that I'd like to explore briefly, one of which is the narrative. I mean, firstly, it's an incredibly stylish game. Aesthetically, it's incredibly stylish. I love how much of its own identity it has, and how it mixes this kind of like slightly macabre, slightly goofy, there's cartoon cats in it. And even the explanation for the cartoon cats that float on clouds and are called angels is that's human beings' minds inventing something or interpreting something that can't be beheld, and they're just viewing it through the only filter that they know how to. And it reminds me of like Lovecraftian horror, like cosmic horror is talked about like that people just can't, they don't. And I think there's stuff in Bloodborne, I think, where they talk about that as well, where it's people just can't see something because their brain just cannot comprehend it. It doesn't know how to frame what it's seeing, so it just blanks it out and it doesn't see anything. Or in this case, it puts a filter on it of a cartoon cat for White, the character White, at least. I think for Yellow, he sees John Cena, which I think is quite amusing. So the narrative goes into some interesting places. It doesn't like dwell super hard on things. It's just, these are just passing references in some cases. And it is by turns kind of goofy and funny and cutting and observational. But it's also it uses a very tried and tested mechanic or tool, which is amnesia, which could just be tired and boring and all the rest of it. But I think it's a very simple thing that it does here, because you, along with White, your character, you effectively have amnesia. He has amnesia. He has lived through some events that he doesn't remember. You don't know what those events are. So effectively, you're both starting from the same place. But unusually, everybody else seems to know stuff about you or about White that they're not telling you. And that doesn't often happen. I think there's usually a much quicker resolution between you have amnesia as a character in a video game. You're told that X person knows who you are, or knows what your purpose is, or knows what you were trying to do before you got amnesia. You track them down, you have a conversation with them, they reveal their stuff. In Neon White, you're constantly talking to people on a day-by-day basis, in-game, day-by-day basis. And they know stuff and they're not telling you. And that, I think, makes it more intriguing than it does just a usual shtick to, not reveal everything in an exposition dump about this character. So you learn alongside that character. And I think that for me has made the narrative quite, it's a relatively slight narrative, but it's made it quite compelling in a way that I think other things aren't, because it doesn't, when you look at something like Mirror's Edge, that had sort of a more grandiose story that it was trying to tell.
And it just felt like it got in the way. And that was told through, okay, you got to stop doing the fun bit of the game now and just have a cutscene and then have another cutscene. And it's like, this isn't a great way to tell a story, particularly in the context of a game that's about movement. And here it's a very you're given your hub area. You can have these optional conversations if you want to. You don't have to. You can seek out those gifts that you mentioned earlier in each level if you want to. That allows you to see each level in a certain way, and it then allows you to learn more about the characters and their relationships. But you don't have to do that. You can just bomb it through all of the levels and just treat it purely as a speedrunning sim.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've been really impressed even with that. I think it's basically everything apart from what the Switch version looks like on a big screen TV. I'm impressed with, because on a big screen TV the Switch version looks like trash, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Art direction is amazing, but the game just technically just doesn't look good.
Yeah, it's a shame. I'm playing on PC with a Xbox controller, and it's don't have any of those.
No, all those big jaggy edges. It's like everybody's made of individual blocks.
Yeah. At first, I thought the game was. I thought it was like a Paradise Killer spin-off or something. At first, because it looks so similar to a completely different game, but it looks so similar. So I know I've. Having played more of the game, I know more about who Neon White is than you do. It sounds like. So some of that stuff has been revealed. I think for me, the thing that I like about the most about the narrative is, I think, just the quality of the individual writing for each of the individual characters is really good. Like the people who run Heaven are seemingly these arrogant, stuck up, and kind of dumb, individuals. And I like the sort of the irony of, oh, we're going to heaven and it's going to be great and it's wonderful and it's peace and love and the only one of you that can get there is the person who can kill everything as much as possible. Just kill in order to get to heaven. And characters are killing off other characters, and it's like, oh well, whatever. Right, whatever. Carry on. One less to worry about
for a certain subset of people. It's a bit like getting on a plane. It's like, oh, we're getting on a plane that's going to fly in the sky and go to another country, and you have this vision of what it might be in your head, and then you get on the plane and realise that the whole plane isn't first class, and that's where you would need to be in order to have the experience that you think you're going to have. And that's this is. It's heaven is only. There's still a class system. There's only a select few, and the fact that it's run by these kind of stuck up, haughty, idiotic beings, it kind of just fits for me. It's like that. Yeah, of course, that makes sense. That's who's running Heaven, if indeed it is Heaven, because that's currently in question in my game at least. So yeah.
But yeah, no, I like the individual character, and I like how they're all so stereotypical. They're such cliches. Neon White, he's the amnesia one. Neon Yellow, he's the one who's the sort of dude bro, frat boy,
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
He's Neon Violet, the best character, obviously, she's basically Harley Quinn. She's a sadistic,
maniacal,
sex fiend. And Neon Red. I won't say too much about Neon Red because she seems more normal. But there's anyway, no spoilers. With our previous video, our Elden Ring video, we got told off in the comments about spoilers. So fewer story spoilers if that's what you're really worried about with Neon White. So I guess we've run out of time, but good game then, Neon White.
Excellent game. Yeah, and I love that it's hard to describe. I love that, and it made me realize how much we contextualize, how much it's just a common thing, and it's quite a systematic of anything in the way that you describe things in relation to other things. And that's an obvious thing to do because nothing exists in a vacuum, but it's very common to just say, oh, it's this Elden Ring is like Demon Souls, but in an open world or whatever. And this kind of just the form of this thing just somewhat belies an easy explanation. It's it's kind of like Mirror's Edge and Doom and Portal, and it's like I like that. I like that it's not an easy thing to describe, except to say that it is excellent. And yeah, I would wholeheartedly recommend it. And yeah, I mean, perhaps PC is perhaps the nicer, maybe the more comfortable way to play it. But as I say, I have been impressed by the gyroscopic controls on Switch, and that's the first time I've ever said that. So yeah, even if for no other reason, it actually gives you a reason to use the gyroscopic controls on Switch. It's worth checking out.
Yeah, I've never used Jog. Well, have I? No, I have.
You'd have used them, just not
stopped using them.
Yeah, you'd have gone. Oh, that's how that
minutes.
works. No, thanks. I'm not. That seems like far too much faff. Whereas here, it really works really well. And I think, as I've said to you a couple of times, I'd love to play it in VR because it has that feel of like, yeah, the way that you're moving around the world and the way that you're moving your hands. It feels like very just a tactile environment to be in. You just need a bit of like wind in your hair, and it will just be like you're really in heaven.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. Well, maybe you can get a big fan out. Maybe that's what I'll do.
It is the weather.
Like, I'll get a big fan out and then play it on gyroscopic.
4D, yeah.
Old friends, ex-lovers. Only one of us can stay in heaven, and I've got a score to settle.
Thanks for listening. Now, please do remember to subscribe if you haven't already. We are available via Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, and literally anywhere else you might think to get podcasts. And if you've got time, if you could leave us a 5-star review, that would be absolutely fantastic. A reminder that a video version of Gaming the Podcast is available via YouTube. Just visit the Indie by Design YouTube channel to check that out. And if you'd like to stay up to date with future podcasts, books, any special offers we're running on the books, then please do visit indiebydesign.net and follow us on Twitter. We are at indiebydesign. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again next time.